When mansions become nightmares. Behind the glossy magazine spreads and dazzling security gates, some celebrity homes hide secrets far darker than the gossip columns ever print. In Britain, where every stone and timber seems to hum with centuries of memory, even the rich and famous can't escape what waits after midnight. For every palatial drawing room and sun-drenched garden, there's a cold spot in the hall, a door that slams with no wind, a restless shadow that refuses to move on. Here, beneath the chandelier light and velvet curtains, nightmares slip in uninvited, reminding us that no matter how high the walls, some hauntings can't be locked out. These are the homes where fame flickers and fear takes hold, where legends live on and the past still paces the floors at night. Number 2. The Cursed Abbey, Sir Tom Jones's haunted country estate. Tucked away among the rolling, rain-soaked hills of South Wales stands a grand old estate with an ancient, almost sacred stillness about it, a place that seems to hold its breath at dusk. For a few short years, it belonged to a man with a voice big enough to fill stadiums, a Welsh icon known around the world, Sir Tom Jones. But even a legend can't always outsing what lingers in the shadows. The estate had always been a source of local fascination, perched at the edge of a village where stories passed from parent to child like cherished heirlooms. Long before Tom Jones bought the property, it was known as the Abbey, a sprawling manor built on the ruins of a medieval monastery. Beneath its gardens, old stones slumbered, etched with the worn Latin prayers of long-dead monks. The villagers whispered that the past there never rested easy. Jones was drawn in by the beauty, the age-blackened beams, the high stone arches, the mist that rolled off the fields each morning like a blessing and a warning. At first, it seemed a perfect retreat, far from the city lights and paparazzi, but the peace was only surface deep. Almost from the moment he moved in, strange things began to happen. Doors opened and closed by themselves, echoing through empty halls. At night, staff heard low voices chanting in an unrecognizable tongue, a soft, rhythmic sound that seemed to seep from the very walls. Guests spoke of icy drafts that curled around them even in the height of summer, and would sometimes wake to the overwhelming scent of candle wax and incense. One housekeeper, seasoned and unshakable, lasted only a month. She claimed she'd seen figures in robes gliding through the old abbey's cloisters, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their heads bowed in prayer. Another member of staff, tasked with locking up each evening, refused to step into the west wing after dusk. "Something's watching," she told the village pub landlord, her hands trembling around her glass. "It's not cruel, but it's old. Older than any of us." Jones himself remained outwardly unbothered, at least in public. But those close to him said he slept poorly and had a habit of leaving radios playing softly throughout the night, as if to drown out something only he could hear. Once, during a summer party, guests claimed to see candle flames gutter and twist all at once, as if snuffed by a sudden breath. The locals still talk about the Abbey's singing stones, the midnight chants, and the shadows that slip between trees when the moon is full. Tom Jones eventually sold the estate, moving on to less storied ground. But ask anyone in the village, and they'll say the Abbey remembers, and it still doesn't like to be left alone when darkness falls. Number 3. The Phantom of Richmond, Daniel Radcliffe's ghostly flat. In the leafy, storybook suburb of Richmond, just west of London's buzzing heart, sits a row of elegant Georgian flats with ivy crawling up their whitewashed facades. It was here, at the edge of the river and fame, that Daniel Radcliffe, a boy wizard turned household name, sought a touch of ordinary life. What he found instead was a presence that refused to be wished away. Richmond has always worn its history quietly, the kind of place where secrets float beneath the hum of passing boats and the scent of old gardens. Locals still talk about the flat Radcliffe rented, tucked above a crooked antique shop, shaded by a sprawling chestnut tree. At first glance, It seemed perfect a sanctuary for a young actor seeking privacy after years under the harsh lights of stardom. But soon, the old bones of the building revealed themselves. Radcliffe has never shied away from admitting his brushes with the unexplained. He once joked that the place was far too old to ever really be empty. According to friends, it began with the little thing's footsteps overhead when no one was home. Doors left ajar in the morning after he was sure he'd locked them. The flat was always cold, even when the radiators hissed and windows were sealed against the damp. He complained of drafts that seemed to slip under the doors, carrying with them a faint, unfamiliar perfume. One night, while learning lines late, Radcliffe caught the unmistakable shape of someone passing down the hallway, too tall, too slow, and utterly silent. Convinced he was alone, he stood frozen as the figure drifted into the old guest room, vanishing without sound. Friends staying over reported hearing whispers in empty rooms, and once a glass left on the counter shattered in the dead of night, its pieces scattered like ice across the floor. Neighbors, always eager for a good story, claimed that the building had a history even longer than its blue plaque suggested. Decades ago, it was rumored to have housed a retired stage magician who died alone, leaving behind nothing but faded posters and a parlor of mirrors. Some say his restless spirit wandered the building, forever seeking an audience. As the months went by, Radcliffe's unease grew. Sleep became fitful, interrupted by creaks and sighs that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. He took to leaving lights on in the kitchen, and on more than one occasion he fled the flat in the middle of the night to walk along the river until dawn. Eventually, Daniel Radcliffe moved on, trading the Richmond flat for brighter, newer quarters. But neighbors still speak of the chills that linger long after tenants come and go, and on foggy nights, some say you can still see a shadow move behind those tall windows, pausing just long enough to be noticed, never long enough to be explained. Number 4. Sir Paul's Shadows. The Beatles' haunted street John's Wood home. Nestled on a quiet street in Street. John's Wood, Paul McCartney's London townhouse, wears its history with effortless charm, white columns, tall windows, and the kind of gardens that bloom whether you're watching or not. But beneath the music and memories, the house keeps secrets that have rippled through the years, whispered about in local pubs, and sung in softer keys by those who've spent a night within its walls. McCartney first purchased the home in the mid-60s, flush with Beatles fame and searching for somewhere to anchor his whirlwind life. The house itself was old enough to have seen wars, fortunes, and faded portraits. Even before the keys changed hands, locals told stories of odd happenings, lights glowing in empty rooms, distant laughter drifting down the stairs, and a faint scent of pipe smoke long after the last owner had passed away. It was the kind of place where the past pressed in, comfortable as an old coat, but just a bit too heavy at times. At first, Sir Paul wrote it all off as quirks, old pipes, tired timbers, the house settling into another era. But the oddities didn't fade. More than once, he heard footsteps late at night when the rest of the house was still. Doors he'd shut tight would be wide open in the morning, and sometimes, out of the corner of his eye, he'd glimpse a figure standing at the top of the stairs, never there when he looked straight on. One evening, while playing piano, McCartney recalled a sudden chill, as if someone had slipped in behind him to listen. Guests began to notice it too. A close friend visiting for a weekend swore she felt a tap on her shoulder while reading in the study, only to turn and find herself alone. Another house guest, staying in the smallest upstairs bedroom, woke from a dream to the unmistakable sound of someone humming a tune she later realized was an old Beatles melody, one that hadn't been written until years after the house was built. Neighbors, keen-eyed and curious, began to avoid the sidewalk directly in front of the townhouse after dark. Stories spread about a shadow moving behind the curtains, or the ghostly outline of a woman in Edwardian dress gliding past the bay window. Some said it was just legend. London is filled with old houses and older ghosts, but the talk persisted. For McCartney, the house never felt threatening, only watchful, as if every note he played or lyric he wrote became another memory etched into its walls. Even after he moved on, neighbors still slow their pace when passing the house at twilight, glancing up at the windows where music and mystery once lived side by side. In Street, John's Wood, some shadows linger, long after the final chord has faded. Number 5. The Witch of Hampstead, Kate Winslet's mysterious mansion. In the heart of Hampstead, where cobbled lanes disappear under arching oaks and ivy climbs the old brick walls, stands a mansion whose elegance masks a deeper chill. For a time it was home to Kate Winslet, drawn by the neighborhood's quiet charm and the house's timeless beauty. But soon after moving in, Winslet discovered that her grand Hampstead retreat was famous for more than its architectural pedigree. Locals had long whispered about its shadowed halls, and the ghostly residents said to wander from room to room a woman in Victorian dress, seen only in flashes and always just out of reach. Winslet herself never became one for public ghost stories, but friends noticed she seemed unsettled in the house, drawn and restless in a way that felt out of character. She complained of sudden cold spots that clung to certain corners even on the sunniest afternoons. No matter how many fires burned in the grate or how thick the curtains, there was always one hallway that made the hair rise on the back of her neck. Doors slammed without warning, the noise echoing like thunder through the stillness, startling her awake in the dead of night. When she asked builders to inspect the hinges and windows, they found nothing out of place. It wasn't just Winslet who felt the house's peculiar energy. Visitors spoke of catching glimpses of a pale figure standing at the end of the corridor, vanishing the instant you looked straight at her. More than one guest refused to use the upstairs bathroom after dusk, citing an oppressive atmosphere and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The staff rarely lingered after their work was done, each with their own stories, keys gone missing, polished mirrors fogging over with handprints, a whisper just out of earshot. The locals, never shy about sharing a tale, called her the Hampstead Witch, though her story was stitched together from half-remembered rumors and old news clippings. Some said she'd been the daughter of a wealthy merchant, driven to madness after a forbidden love. Others claimed she dabbled in the occult, her presence marked by the scent of lavender and a lingering sadness in every room she entered. Whether tragic or malevolent, she became part of the mansion's identity, a secret companion for whoever next called it home. Winslet eventually sold the house and moved on, taking only her memories and a lingering sense of unease. The new owners brushed off the rumors, but neighbors still crossed to the other side of the street after sunset, glancing up at the windows that always seemed to glow a little longer than the rest. In Hampstead, stories take root as easily as wildflowers, and some ghosts never quite leave the garden gate. Number 6. Benedicts Poltergeist, Strange Happenings in Highgate. Highgate is a place that wears its legends on its sleeve. Fog drifts low over the rooftops, ancient trees crowd narrow lanes, and stories seep into the brickwork like the ever-present London damp. When Benedict Cumberbatch, known for his calm intellect and unflappable characters, moved into a stately period home tucked away in this storied neighborhood, he wasn't expecting to encounter the supernatural. But soon after settling in, he discovered that even the sharpest mind can be unsettled by the inexplicable. The house itself was a beauty, tall sash windows, carved fireplaces, original moldings every inch humming with history. Locals spoke with reverence of its Victorian grandeur, but there was always a hesitation, a lowering of voices as they recalled the house's peculiar reputation. Previous tenants had whispered about the Highgate spirit, a presence as unpredictable as the weather and twice as cold. Cumberbatch laughed it off at first, his rational side dismissing the tales as neighborly mischief. But the house quickly began to challenge that logic. Lights flickered in the evenings, bulbs newly replaced would sputter and die for no reason, leaving rooms draped in sudden shadow. Doors slammed with a violence that made the floorboards tremble, though no breeze stirred outside and every window was latched tight. On more than one occasion, the actor found cherished items, moved scripts, vanished from his desk, only to reappear days later on the kitchen table, shoes carefully lined up in the hallway, suddenly toppled in a heap. Guests noticed it too, those strange moments when conversation would halt mid-sentence as a painting swung gently on the wall, or the television switched itself onto static and wouldn't turn off. One friend, staying over during a winter storm, awoke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. When they rushed to the sitting room, they found every window intact but a vase of lilies shattered on the floor, water pooling around it in the moonlight. Staff who worked at the house refused to be left alone after dark. They muttered about tapping sounds in the walls, like fingers drumming or knuckles rapping from somewhere deep inside the house's bones. A cleaner claimed she heard footsteps pacing the attic overhead while everyone was downstairs for lunch, slow, deliberate, as if someone was searching for something lost long ago. Cumberbatch tried everything: electricians, locksmiths, even a local vicar to bless the house. The disturbances never stopped, only faded into the background, woven into the fabric of daily life. The poltergeist, as it became known, wasn't angry exactly, just present, insistent, determined to be acknowledged. Eventually, Cumberbatch made peace with his ghostly housemate. He joked in interviews about sharing his home with a restless spirit, a touch of dry wit masking a grudging respect. In Highgate, the past is never far away, and in this elegant home, it walks the halls as surely as any living resident, flickering in the corners where the lights won't stay on. Number 7. The Queen Guitarist's Curse, Brian May's Windsor estate. Deep in the green sweep of Windsor, where ancient oaks stretch toward the sky and the river curves with slow authority, sits a mansion with a history as rich and complicated as any royal. For years, its rooms echoed not only with the music of Queen's legendary guitarist Brian May, but with rumors of something far less earthly, a curse that hung over the house like low morning mist. May had always been drawn to the unusual, and the Windsor estate, with its turreted towers and sprawling grounds, seemed a perfect retreat from the relentless pace of rock stardom. Locals, though, eyed the property warily. They remembered the stories told by generations before them. The original owners, a noble family brought low by misfortune, a string of sudden deaths, fortunes lost, and marriages ended in heartbreak. It was said the matriarch of the house, accused of witchcraft and driven to despair, cursed the land with her final breath. For decades after, shadows moved through the halls, and no owner seemed able to stay for long. At first, May dismissed the legends as just that old wives' tales spun to scare children. He poured his energy into restoring the crumbling manor, filling the air with the sound of guitars and laughter. But soon, the house began to resist his efforts. Rooms that had been warm and inviting during the day would turn bitterly cold after dark. Doors locked themselves, even when the keys hung untouched by the door. Sometimes, in the dead of night, May would wake to the sound of footsteps on the grand staircase, measured, deliberate, as if someone from another era was making the rounds. More disturbing were the shadows. Guests whispered of fleeting figures that seemed to watch from the corners, vanishing the moment the lights flickered on. Staff reported hearing their names called from empty rooms, and one housekeeper refused to return after seeing a pale woman in a tattered dress standing at the edge of the garden, only to find no footprints in the dew. There were strange malfunctions too, recording equipment cutting out during late-night sessions, guitars falling out of tune for no reason, whole compositions lost to static and silence. May, pragmatic but open-minded, tried to explain it all away. Yet the longer he lived there, the heavier the atmosphere grew, as if the walls themselves were burdened by old grief. He later admitted in interviews that there were parts of the house he preferred to avoid after sunset, rooms that felt charged with an ancient sorrow. The curse, he mused, was not so much a single event as a mood, a thread of misfortune woven through the history of the place. Even now, years after May moved on, the Windsor mansion remains the subject of local gossip. Some say the shadows are quieter, but few linger after nightfall. The estate stands as a reminder. Even legends can be humbled by what history leaves behind, and some houses never truly let go of their ghosts. In the end, fame offers no shelter from the unknown. Behind every velvet rope and gilded gate, the past finds its own way in whispering, flickering, and refusing to be ignored. These haunted homes are more than cautionary tales for the rich and famous. They are living legends, woven into the fabric of their neighborhoods, retold on stormy nights and shadowed walks home. Locals still cross the street rather than pass too close. Children dare each other to touch the garden walls, and new owners step quietly, listening for footsteps that may not be their own. Perhaps that's the true power of a haunting, to remind us that no one, not even those we idolize, can outpace the echoes of history. If you ever find yourself wandering near these famous addresses after dark, pause for a moment and listen. You might hear more than just your footsteps, and you might discover that, in Britain, some stories never rest.